You can hear footsteps, heavy sandals on marble, getting closer. Your heart hammers against ribs that already ache from yesterday's beating, and you know before the door even opens what's coming. You're 12, maybe 13. No one bothered to record the day you were born, but they recorded the day you were sold. 15 silver denarii, less than a good hunting dog. Before we go any further, I need to know where in the world are you watching this from? It's absolutely incredible to me that a story buried under 2,000 years of marble and myth can reach someone in their living room, on a bus, across oceans and centuries. Drop a comment. Let's make this moment global. Now, let me tell you where this begins. Rome, at the height of its power. We're talking about the empire that gave us aqueducts, literature, law. The civilization we study in marble busts and Latin mottos. But beneath every togaed senator, behind every grand villa with its frescoed walls and perfumed gardens, there was a shadow economy, a hidden engine, and it ran on bodies. Specifically, the bodies of girls who had no choice, no voice, and often no name. Historians estimate that at Rome's peak, nearly 40% of the population in Italia were enslaved. We're talking millions, and among them, the most vulnerable weren't the miners or the field workers. They at least had the mercy of exhaustion. No, the most vulnerable were the ancilli, the household slaves. The girls who served in bedrooms, not kitchens, who were valued not for their strength, but for their youth, their silence, their fertility. This isn't a story with a hero. It's not a story with a happy ending, but it is a story that happened over and over and over again. In Rome, in Pompeii, in estates across the empire. And the worst part? No one thought it was wrong. It was just normal. Let's start with how you got there. You weren't born a slave. You were born in a village, maybe in Gaul, maybe Britannia, maybe Thrace, somewhere green, somewhere with a mother who sang to you, a father who called you by a name that meant something, beloved, bright one, morning star. That name is gone now, burned with your village when the Roman legion came through. They didn't come for conquest this time. They came for product. You were maybe 10 years old, maybe younger. The soldiers pulled you from the rubble, checked your teeth like you were livestock, and tied your wrists with hemp so rough it left burns that never fully healed. Then the walk. Days, maybe weeks. You marched in a chain gang with other children, some crying, some silent. One girl who wouldn't stop screaming until a soldier hit her so hard she stopped making sounds at all. You learned fast. Silence kept you alive. The slave market in Rome was called the Forum Boarium, cattle market. That should tell you everything. You were stripped naked in front of a crowd, merchants, matrons, bored aristocrats looking for entertainment. They poked your budding chest, pried open your mouth to count teeth. One man, reeking of wine and garum, ran his hand between your legs and nodded approvingly. Intact. Good. That'll fetch more. The auctioneer painted your feet white with chalk. That meant you were from abroad, exotic, untrained, raw. He stood you on a platform, spinning you slowly while calling out your qualities. Young, fertile, unblemished. The bids started at 10 denarii, then 12, 15, sold to a man in a crimson toga with rings on every finger. You didn't know it yet, but you'd been bought for a very specific purpose. The house you entered wasn't a prison. That was the cruelty of it. It was beautiful. Columns and mosaics. A courtyard with a fountain where goldfish swam lazily in crystal water. Frescoes of gods and nymphs covered the walls, images of beauty, of myth. It looked like the kind of place where good things should happen. But you were taken to the back, the cella, the slave quarters. A narrow room with straw mattresses on stone. No window. The air smelled like sweat, sour wine, and something else. Fear, maybe. The other girls didn't look at you. That was your first real warning. An older woman, the Vilica, the slave overseer, grabbed your chin and tilted your face toward the lamplight. "You'll do," she muttered. Then she said the words that would define the rest of your existence. "The master likes them young." You didn't understand. Not yet. They bathed you that night. Not gently scrubbed you with pumice until your skin was raw and pink. Oiled your hair. Rubbed your skin with rose-scented unguents. Draped you in a thin linen shift that left nothing to the imagination. You thought maybe they were preparing you to serve at a banquet, to carry wine, to stand in the corner and look pleasant. You were so wrong. He came to you after the dinner guests had left. You were in a small room off the atrium, barely more than a closet, with a narrow bed and a single oil lamp. You'd been told to wait there, to stay quiet. The door opened and he stepped in. Not old, not young. Just a man, a Roman citizen. Someone with rights, with property, with the full protection of the law. You had none of those things. He didn't ask your name. Didn't speak at all, really, except to tell you to lie down. When you hesitated, still not fully understanding, he shoved you. Not violently, just matter-of-factly, the way you'd move a chair. And then he did what he'd purchased you to do. It hurt. God, it hurt so deeply, you almost forgot how to breathe. The pain wasn't just in your body, though that was sharp enough to make your vision blur and your teeth sink into your own flesh to keep from crying out. It was everywhere, flooding through you like fire, twisting something inside that would never come undone again. The physical agony was almost a mercy compared to the truth that came next, the quiet, shattering understanding that this wasn't just a moment. This was forever. This was what you were now. Not a person. Not a soul with dreams or will or choice. Just something to be used when wanted and discarded when done. When it was over, he rose without a word, without even the faintest glance in your direction. The door closed. The silence he left behind was louder than any scream. You stayed there, motionless, your body trembling, sticky with blood, sweat, and shame. The lamp's weak glow painted shadows across the walls that had already seen too much. You curled in on yourself, trying to disappear into the emptiness, and watched the light fade until nothing was left but the darkness and the sound of your own heart breaking. The next night, he came again, and the night after that, and the night after that. Sometimes it wasn't him. Sometimes it was his friends. Once it was his brother, visiting from Ostia, who wanted to try out the new one. The domina, the lady of the house, knew. Of course she knew. She'd smile at you in the hallways, pat your head like you were a pet. "You're lucky, you know," she'd say. "Some masters are cruel. Ours is generous. He feeds you, clothes you. You should be grateful." Grateful! Here's what the historical record shows us. This wasn't rare. This wasn't abuse in the sense that Romans understood it. This was normalcy. Roman law was explicit. A slave had no legal right to refuse their owner. No right to bodily autonomy. The philosopher Seneca, the one we read in schools, the one praised for his stoic wisdom, casually wrote about how slaves were tools that happened to speak. Cato the Elder, in his farming manual, advised buying young female slaves because they were more malleable and could serve multiple functions. Multiple functions. Let that sink in. You learned the rules fast. Never say no. Never cry where they can hear you. Never, ever fight back. One girl tried. Her name was Secunda Second, because no one cared to give her a real name. She scratched a client's face, drew blood. They dragged her to the center of the courtyard and whipped her in front of all the other slaves. 50 lashes. She didn't survive the night. Her body was thrown into the Tiber like garbage. But here's the thing they don't tell you in history books. Your body didn't just belong to the master. It belonged to the economy. By the time you'd been in that house for a year, you'd missed your bleeding twice. The medica, a slave herself, trained in medicine, examined you with cold, practiced hands. "Pregnant," she announced. The domina clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful! More slaves for the household. If it's a boy, we might even train him as a secretary." She turned to you, beaming. "You've done well. You hadn't done anything. Something had been done to you. But in Rome, that distinction didn't exist. They carried you to the birthing room, a suffocating stone cell that smelled of blood, sweat, and mold. The air was thick, the single candle guttering in the corner, throwing long, trembling shadows across the walls. The chair they placed you on was carved from rough wood, its surface slick from the bodies that had come before you. Grooves for the legs, ropes for the stirrups. Nothing built for comfort, only for use. When the pain began, it was beyond imagining. Hours blurred together, your body straining to deliver what it was never ready to bear. You screamed until your throat felt raw, until the sound died in your chest. The midwife didn't meet your eyes. Her hands moved with cold precision, her attention fixed not on you, but on what would come out of you. That was all that mattered, the result, the product. And then, at last, it was over. A child's cry filled the air, a girl tiny, fragile, alive. For the first time in what felt like forever, something broke open inside you. Amid the pain and exhaustion, you felt a flicker of love, fierce and desperate. You reached for her, lips trembling with a name you barely remembered, your mother's name. They took her away. "Slave infants belong to the master," the Vilica said flatly. "She'll be raised in the nursery. If she's lucky, she'll be a house servant. If not..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Your daughter would grow up to be you. They put you back to work within a week. Your body hadn't healed, you bled when you walked, infection setting in, but they didn't care. You were still functional. And now you had a new role. Nutrix, wet nurse. But not for your own child, for the domina's newborn son. Your breasts, swollen and aching, were for him now. Roman citizens didn't nurse their own children, that was slave work. Beneath them. So you sat in the nursery, feeding a freeborn Roman child, while your own daughter was somewhere else in the house, drinking goat's milk from a rag. You never saw her grow up. By the time she was 5, she'd been sold to another household. You never even learned her name. This relentless cycle purchase, exploitation, pregnancy, separation, was the engine that powered the Roman slave system. It wasn't hidden. It was recorded, normalized, even praised. You can trace it in the wax tablets of Pompeii, sealed beneath the ash of Vesuvius, where transactions list the buying and selling of women as plainly as livestock. You find it in the writings of Columella, Rome's agricultural expert, who advised that enslaved women who bore many children should be given lighter labor as an incentive for breeding, and in the letters of Pliny the Younger, who notes without a flicker of guilt that his estate produced 15 new slaves in a single year. Each word, each line, reveals a world where human life was measured by fertility, not dignity, a society where motherhood was not a sacred bond, but a mechanism of profit, and birth itself became another act of ownership, produced, like wheat, like wine. But here's what haunts me most. Some of these girls left traces. Not names, they weren't given names worth recording, but objects. Archaeologists have found, in the slave quarters of Pompeii and Herculaneum, tiny scraps of writing, graffiti scratched into walls. Most of it is mundane records of chores, crude jokes, but some of it is poetry. Fragments of prayers. One, found in a cramped room beneath a villa near Pompeii, simply reads, Mater, si me vides. Mother, if you can see me. She was writing to a mother she'd been torn from, a mother who would never read it. A message thrown into the void. That girl, the one who scratched those words into plaster, 2,000 years ago, she's the one I can't stop thinking about. Because she's proof. Proof that they felt, that they hoped, that they remembered being human, even when the world insisted they weren't. The system didn't end quickly. It didn't end cleanly. Slavery persisted in Rome for centuries, through the Republic, through the Empire, through the rise of Christianity, which, despite its rhetoric about the equality of souls, did almost nothing to challenge the institution. St. Paul himself wrote, Slaves, obey your masters. It wasn't until the empire's collapse, the economic shifts of the Middle Ages, that slavery in its Roman form finally faded. But the girls? The millions of girls who were bought, bred, and broken. They faded faster. No monuments, no epitaphs. History forgot them almost immediately. The men who used them built temples and wrote treatises, and were remembered as great thinkers. The girls became dust, except for those scratches on the wall, those fragments, those tiny acts of defiance that said, I was here, I existed, I mattered. And maybe that's why we tell this story now. Not to judge Rome, though God knows it deserves judgment. Not to feel superior, our own history is soaked in blood. But to remember, to look directly at the truth, to say their names, even if we have to invent them, because no one else did. Secunda, the girl who fought back. Mater, the girl who prayed to her mother. Morning Star, the name someone gave a child before Rome took it away. They were real. Their pain was real. And for 2,000 years, we've built our civilization on the fiction that it didn't matter, that they didn't matter. But they did. Close your eyes and picture it. A girl, 12 years old, standing naked on an auction block in the Forum Boreum. The sun is hot. The crowd is loud. She's terrified. But she's not crying. She learned not to cry. And in her mind, she's somewhere else. Somewhere green. Somewhere with a name that means beloved. She's still there, frozen in that moment, waiting for us to see her. Don't look away.